The elimination method is one of the main ways to solve simultaneous equation. So the idea is just to remove, eliminate one variable so you can find the other. So the basic idea, if two equations have the same variable with the opposite coefficients, you can add or you can subtract the equations to make that variable disappear. Then you solve the easier equation that remains. So the steps, these are the steps. Write both equations in standard form. So we're going to write it in this form right here, where the coefficient multiplied by x plus a coefficient multiplying our y is equal to what c, whichever the which would be our answer. And step 2, make the coefficients of one variable the same or opposites. You may need to multiply one or both equations. So you need to, there are cases where you'd have to multiply either one or both equations in order to make, one variable have the same or opposite coefficients. Alright, and the third step now is to add or subtract the equations to eliminate one variable. So in order to eliminate one variable, we have to add or subtract the equations. And then we have our fourth step, which is to solve the new equation. So we're going to solve the new equation just as how we will normally solve our linear equation. And then our last step is to substitute the value back into one of the original equations to find the second variable. So these are the steps. If you follow these steps, you can't go wrong. So let's jump into our examples right now. So example 1, we have x plus y is equal to 9, and that's our equation 1. So I'm just gonna put that equation 1 right here so we can remember that this is our first equation. And then I am going to put equation 2 below right here so we can always remember that this is our second equation. Now we need to find the values for both the x and the y that can make both equations true. So in this case right here, I can either add or subtract in order to eliminate one of the variable. So I can eliminate the x or I can eliminate the y. In this case, however, I am going to add. So let me change the color of my pen to a different color. So I am going to add. Now the reason I did not multiply one equation or the other equation is because when I look at both equations, I realize just by adding I can eliminate one of my variables. So in this case right here, I do not have to multiply an equation or two equations, because just looking at these two equations right here, I can add or even subtract in order to get rid of one of my I could add in order to get rid of one of my variables. I don't want to subtract in this case right here. So yeah, so let's add. So if I am adding right here my x's, so whenever you add, let me change the color of the markers again. So whenever you add, and as I said before, you in this case right here, you can add or you can subtract. But let me just quickly change the color of the marker because this is very important for you to note. And I'm gonna separate it. I'm gonna separate each column. The reason why I'm separating these is because when I'm adding my two equations, it's always important for you to remember what we add is the like terms. So what is x plus x? X plus x is 2x. So that's 2x. Alright? And what is x? What is y plus negative y? Now, if I have y plus negative y, that is the same thing. That's the same thing as me saying y minus y. And y minus y, that is equal to 0. So y plus negative y, that is also equal to 0. So by adding these two, variables, the positive y plus the negative y, we will basically cancel out. So we will have no variable right here. We can put a plus 0 if we want to. So plus 0. Or if we wanted to, we could have 0. And that is all equal to. So 9 plus 1 is equal to 10. So let's go back to our steps now. So first thing first, we ensure that the equations were in this standard form. They were both in the standard form right here. So we wouldn't have to change the way how the equations looked. Make the coefficients of one or more of one variable the same or opposite. In this case right here, we did not have to make it because these coefficients for both the x and the y, they were the same because each of them had the coefficient of 1, meaning that we just had the letters alone. So we didn't have to multiply any equation by any number. So moving on to question to step 3, add or subtract the equations to eliminate one variable. So in this case right here, I added my two equations, and when I added the two equations right there, then the variable y would have been cancelled out, or the variable y would have disappeared, because if I add y, so y plus negative y would be equal to 0, and because it's equal to 0, my y would basically disappear. So back to step 4. So solve the new equation, and that's where I am right now, where I am gonna solve the new equation. So let me write my new equation right here, and I'm gonna change the color of it. So my new equation now is gonna be 2x plus 0 is equal to 10, and 0 is nothing, so I could just say 2x is equal to 10. So after I write my equation, what I am gonna do now is that I'm gonna simply solve just as how I would solve a linear equation. Why? Look at this. Look at it. Look at this new equation that I have right here. This is definitely just a linear equation. I'm gonna highlight it. So look at this right here. Is this not looking like a linear equation? So what I am gonna do now, I am just gonna solve what is x. So what is the 2 doing to the x right here? What do I have to do in order to get x by itself? Well, the 2 is multiplying the x. So the 2 is multiplying the x, and because 2 is multiplying our x, then all we have to do in order to get x by itself is divide both sides by 2. So because 2 is multiplying the x, in order to get rid of the 2 that's multiplying the x, we can just divide both sides by 2. So 2 divided by 2 and 10 divided by 2. So the 2's will cancel out, will cancel. So the 2's will cancel. Let me change it to black. So the 2's will cancel on this side, and that will just leave me with x is equal to, so 2 divided by 10, 2 divided by 10, that's gonna be equal to 5. Alright, so x is equal to 5. Now that we know that x is equal to 5, we can plug or substitute x is equal to 5 in any one of these two original equations. Let's go back to this step. So step 5, substitute the value back into one of the original equations to find the second variable. So to find the second variable, we're gonna plug or put back our x is equal to 5 into any one of these original. So I'm just gonna use the first one right there. So I'm gonna use equation 1. So in equation 1, so I'm gonna use equation 1. So equation 1 is x plus y. So x, so let me just write it. So x plus y is equal to 9. So now we know what x is. So x is what? 5. So that's gonna be 5 plus y is equal to 9. Alright, so now that we have this equation right here after plugging our 5 right there, so let me just draw a quick little small arrow so persons who are not seeing what's going on, they can see what's going on. This 5 right here, I just plugged it into this equation right here. So x is now equal to 5, and I'm solving for, I am substituting the x right here for the equation 1. That's what I'm gonna use. This is the equation I'm using to find what y is equal to. I want to know what y is equal to, so I want to get y by itself. Now in order to get y by itself, I must move this 5 that's being added to this y right here. So what I am gonna do is that I am gonna move over my 5 to the next side of the equal sign. So if I move my 5 to the next side of the equal sign, then the number remains the same, but the sign changes to the opposite. So the opposite of plus, or the opposite of positive, because 5 is a positive number, or the opposite of plus is negative. So we're gonna end up with our y. So our y now is gonna be equal to 9. So the 9 minus, and I'm gonna change the color. So y, so 9 minus 5. So y is going to be equal to 9 minus 5. Why? Because this 5 that's been added to the y, I am just going to move it to the opposite side of the equal sign. Anytime when we move terms or numbers from one side of the equal sign to the next side of the equal sign, the number remains the same, but the sign changes to the opposite. So the opposite of plus is going to be minus. So 9 minus 5, y is going to be equal to, so 9 minus 5, that is 4. So y is going to be equal to 4. So in the end, we found both answers right here are the answers for both what both letters are, or what both variables are equal to. So x is equal to, so x is equal to 5, and our y is equal to 4. Let's look at equation 1 and put both answers in and see if the equation is true. So x plus y is equal to 9, right? So if x is 5, that would be 5 plus, if y is 4, that's gonna be 4. So 5 plus 4 is equal to 9. So that is correct. That's correct. Alright, so now let's look at example 2. Now example 2, there are two ways of getting our answer for this one right here. So let's look at just, in this case right here, we could just subtract, but because I'm gonna add, let's say I'm gonna add. So what's gonna happen if I'm gonna add the two equations? Well, I can multiply the second equation by 2. So let's do it right there and see. So let's multiply this entire equation by 2. Yes, I know that we could subtract to easily get our answer as well, but in this scenario right here, I am gonna multiply the second equation by 2. So I'm gonna say it again. In this equation right here, you could subtract, because remember, for step 3 you could add or you could subtract to eliminate one of the variable. So if you wanted to, you could just subtract your equation 2 from your equation 1, and y minus y, that will cancel out our y's, and 7 minus 11, that will be 3, and x minus 2x, that you'll be left with x, right? So x will be equal to 3. But in this case right here, I am gonna multiply my second equation by 2. Why? Because instead of subtracting, I am gonna add. So I'm gonna multiply my second equation by 2, just for the fun of it, if I'm gonna add this time. So I am gonna add. So let's go. So if I multiplied my second equation by 2, I'm gonna get this equation right here. So let me just quickly do this. So it's gonna be, so 2 times x, that will be 2x, alright, and let me just multiply again by just to ensure that we get what we should get. I'm gonna multiply my second equation by -2 to ensure that when we add this equation 2 to our first equation, it's gonna be equal to the same. Alright, so let's go, just for the fun of it. Alright, so -2 times x, that's gonna be -2x, and -2 times positive y, that's gonna be -2y, and -x times 7, that's gonna be equal to that's gonna be equal to negative 14. So that's negative 14. So now that we have our new values for equation 2, we're just gonna add the two equations together. So let's add, and when we add our equations together, we're gonna add like terms, or we're gonna add our like terms. Now this equation right here, it is important, but because we multiply the equation by 2 right here, we're gonna end up using this one right here. So this is gonna be our equation 2 when we're adding our two equations together. So this is gonna be my new equation 2. So this is gonna be my new equation 2. Let me just write new right there. Alright, so some person might wonder, why am I doing the long way right here? I am just showing you that you can have so much fun with this, and you're not stuck in one way, or you don't have to do everything one way. So while I explain how you could solve it by just subtracting these two equations to get rid of the y, and then now subtract the x from the 2x, so you can have x by itself. So x will be equal to 7 minus y. 7 minus y is 3, so x will be equal to 3. We can do this as well. Just add the new equation to the first equation, so we can have our new equation, which we will substitute into whichever equation to find our y. So let's go again and have some fun. So after this, so we're gonna use this new equation 2. Now we're gonna add it to equation 1. So 2x plus negative 2x, and I look at this right here. This fits step 2. Make the coefficients of one variable the same or opposites. So in this case right here, yes, some person may think that they're the same. Yes, you have the 2x and you have the 2x right here, but they're opposites because one is a positive 2, but this is a negative 2, so they're opposites. So after we do that, now we can add them, because 2x plus negative 2, that will be equal to 0, so that will cancel off right there. So the 2x will cancel off this 2x right here, and we'll be left with y plus negative 2y, that you'll be left with now just negative y. So how you get the negative y? Well, we can think about negative as what you owe. So if you owe 2, and let's say that the y mean yam, so y could be yams. So if we have 1 yam and you owe 2 yam, then you'll be left with what? 1 yam. So 1 yam. Alright, so y plus negative 2y, you'll be left with just what? A negative y. So again, if you owe 2 yams and you pay 1 yam, then you will be left with, you will still owe 1 yam. So that's one way you can look at it. Equal to, so 11 plus negative 3. And the thing about it, remember, anytime when we add, like for example, if we have 11 plus our negative 14, right? Anytime when we add a negative number, so a positive number plus a negative number, you're basically just subtracting. So 11 plus negative 14 is basically just 11 minus 14, right? So that's just 11 minus 14, and 11 minus 14, that's gonna be, you're gonna be left with negative 3. All right. So it's the same procedure right here where we had, the y and the 2y. So y minus 2y, that's no, that was how you were you were left with the negative y. So whenever you're adding a positive number to a negative number, you're just gonna be subtracting. You're just gonna be subtracting. All right. So uh 11 minus 14, or 11 plus negative 14, that's gonna be, you're gonna be left with 3. So we have y is equal to, uh y is equal to negative 3. All right. So since my y is equal to negative 3, then then you know how can we get a positive number right here? Well, if we have a negative number, if we have negatives on both sides, and we want to get a positive variable or a positive letter right here, we can just divide both sides by negative 1. So if we divide both sides by negative 1, then this is just our way in order to get rid of our negative number. So we end up with y is equal to 3. Alright. So now that we have done that, we are gonna substitute y is equal to 3 in any one of these equations right here to see if we can get our answer. Alright, so let's plug it into equation 2. So equation 2 is x, and let me just change the color of the pen right there, because I think that everyone has had enough of the color blue. So let's try black. So x now is gonna be equal to, so let me just clear this off quickly. So what we're gonna write right there, we're just gonna write equation 2 over here. So this is gonna be x plus y is equal to 7. So this is our equation 2 right here from our original equation. So what we're just gonna do, we're just gonna plug in where y is equal to 3. So if y is equal to 3, let's see what this will be equal to. So this is gonna be equal to x plus 3 is equal to 7. Alright, so in order to get x by itself, we're gonna move our 3 to the opposite side of the equal sign. So if we move our 3 to the opposite side of the equal sign, then our number will remain the same, but the sign will change to the opposite. So let's highlight our positive 3 and move our positive 3 to the next side of the equal sign. So our positive 3 is going to change to the opposite. So now our positive 3 is going to be a negative 3. So that's going to be x is equal to 7 minus 3, and 7 minus 3 is gonna be x is equal to 7 minus 3. You'll be left with 4. Alright, so now that is out, we can have our two equations, so we can test it. So if x is 4, 4 plus 3, 4 plus 3 is 7. That's true. Let's look at let's try our equation. Let's try our answers to see if equation 1 will be true. So let's change the color for our pen right there and plug our answer in equation 1 just to see if our answer works right there. So let's quickly test our answer with equation 1. So equation 1 is 2x plus y. So that's gonna be 2 times, so x is 4 plus y, and y is 3, and that should be equal to 11. Alright, let's see if we get our 11. So 2 times 4 is 8, and 8 plus 3 is equal to 11. So 8 plus 3 is equal to 11. That means that we got our answer correct. So x now is equal to 4, and our y now is equal to 3. So we got our answer correct. So as I told you, I worked it out this way. I did have to do it this way. I did it the longer way just so we can test out step 2, because in certain instances we have to multiply one equation or more by a number in order to make the coefficients of one variable the same or the opposite. In this case right here, for example 2, I multiply the second equation by -2. That's the opposite of 2, by the way, in order to get our our opposite coefficient for the x right here. So this 2x right here, when I plus this 2x right here with a -2x, that will cancel out our x. So I did it just for this reason right here, so I could explore that step. And what do you know, we got our answer. So I am just showing you this way that you can work it like this too. Maths is fun. Let's look at example 3. So example 3 right here, we're just gonna do it as quickly as possible for the purpose of the video. We can't stay too long. So in this case right here, we have 3x plus 2y is equal to 16, and that's our equation 1. So that's our equation 1, and our equation 2 now, we have 2x minus 2y is equal to 4. So that's our equation 2. Now looking at all the like terms for my y variable right here, when I look at the coefficients +2 and -2, we can just add in order to get rid of our y right there. So I'm gonna add my two equations, but just by adding we'll get rid of this y right here. As I said before, I'm just doing this method right here. I could explore another method to get rid of what my x's, but I am gonna get rid of the y right here. It's the faster approach, and I prefer to do the faster method right now. So let's add all our equations. So when we add all our equations, it's gonna add our like terms. So 3x plus 2x, that's gonna be equal to 5x. So 5x, and so 2y, so 2y plus -2y, as I said before, I told you already, whenever you're adding two numbers, if a positive number is being added to a negative number, it's just gonna be subtract. So 2 minus 2, sorry, 2 plus negative 2. So 2 plus negative 2, that's the same as 2 minus 2. So it's the same thing. So in both cases, it's gonna be equal to 0. Alright, so because of that, we would have just eliminated our two variables or two y's right here, because 2y plus negative 2y, you will be left with 0. So plus 0 is equal to, so that's equal to 4 plus 16. So 4 plus 16 is equal to 20. Alright, so now we're left with the equation. Let me just change my marker right here, my pen right here, to black. Alright, so now we're left with the equation 5x is equal to 20. Alright, so in order, this 5x right here, so because this 5x is multiplying our x, so because it's multiplying our x, in order to get rid of our 5 right there, we are going to have to divide both sides by 5. So let me just change the pen color so you can see. So because our, because our 5 is multiplying our x, so 5x is just 5 multiplied by x. So because it is 5 multiplied by x, in order to get rid of the 5, we can divide both sides by 5. So if we divide both sides by 5, then if we divide both sides by 5, then the 5 will cancel each other out on the right hand, on our left hand side. So let's look right here, you'll just cancel each other out. So we'll be left with x is equal to, that's 5 divided by 20. So 5 divided by 20 right here, that's equal to 4. So 5 divided by 20 is equal to 4. And now we know what x is. So x is equal to 4. And we can plug them into any one of these equations right here to see if to find our y. So let's plug it into our first equation. So let me change the color. And I'm gonna plug it into my first equation. So I'm gonna change it to green. So let's plug it into that equation right now. So that's gonna be 3x plus 2y is equal to 16. So this is my equation 1. So this is my equation 1. So that's 3x plus 2y is equal to 16. That's my equation 1. Alright, so 3x plus 2y is equal to 16. So our x is 4, so that's gonna be 3 times 4. So 3 times 4 plus my 2y. So 3 times 4 plus my 2y is equal to 16. Okay, so let's find what x is. So first thing, 3 times 4 is 12. So 12 now plus our 2y. So 2y, and that is equal to 16. We'll be doing some movements right now in order to get y by itself. So what I'm gonna move first is the 12. So let's move our 12. So the 12 right there is a positive 12 that's been added to my 2y. So if I move my positive 12 over to the opposite side of the equal sign, that's gonna change it to the opposite, or the opposite of positive 12, because the 12 is being added to my 2y right here. The 12 is adding to the 2y. So because of that, if I move it to the opposite side of the equal sign, it's gonna change the plus 12 to negative. So I'm gonna have now my 2y. So 2y is gonna be equal to 16. And I said before, the only reason why my 12, when I move it to the opposite side of the equal sign, the only reason why the sign changes to negative is because the 12 was being added to. So the 12 was being added to the 2y. So if I move it to the opposite side of the equal sign, it's going to change the sign to the opposite. So it's going to be negative, but number is going to always remain the same. Alright, so 16 minus 12. So 16 minus 12, that's going to be equal to 4. So that's going to be equal to 4. So I'm going to have, in the end, 2y equal to 4. So 2y is equal to 4. So in order to get y by itself, then I would have to divide, because the 2 is multiplying our y right here. So let me just quickly change the color so you can see. So because 2 is multiplying our y, 2 is multiplying our y on this side of the equal sign. So in order to get rid of the 2 that's multiplying the y, so we can have y by itself, we're going to divide both sides by 2. So divide this side by 2 and divide this side by 2. And when we divide by 2, then the 2's on the left hand side, they're gonna cancel each other out. So in the end, we're left with y. In the end, we're left with, let me just write it over here. In the end, we're left with y is equal to 4 divided by 2. So 4 divided by 2 is equal to 2. So in the end, I got where x is equal to 4 and y is equal to 2. Now in order to test our answer right here, we can test it back in any one of these equations. So let me quickly just test it back in equation 2, and that's the original equation that I'll be using. So let me quickly test it back in equation 2. So in equation 2, I have 2x minus 2y that's equal to 4. So let's see if we get that to be equal to 4. Let's see if we get this equation to be true, with x is equal to 4 and y is equal to 2. So let me just quickly change the marker. So that's gonna be, if x is 4, that's gonna be 2 times 4, and this is gonna be y is equal to 2, so that will be 2 times 2. Alright, so 2 times 4 is gonna be 8. So 8 minus, let me change the color of the pen as well, because I really don't want to get anybody confused. So let me change the color. Alright, so the pen, and let me change the color to about red. Alright, so 2 times 4, that's gonna be 8. So 8 minus, so 2 times 2, because y is equal to 2. 2 times 2 is 4. So 2 times 2 is 4. So we have 8 minus 4. and 8 minus 4 is 4. So yes, that is correct. So x is equal to 4 and y is equal to 2, and that's how we get our answer. So remember, whenever we're solving our simultaneous equations, we can always go back to our steps right here. And just as how you see when I approach question 2 or example 2, you can have a lot of fun with it, because you can always make the coefficients of one variable, so of any one of the variables, the same are opposites. So you can do that by just multiplying one or two equations. So if you multiply one or two equations, you can make any one of the variables have the same or opposite variables. So just by adding or subtracting, we can eliminate any one of the variables. So you can have a lot of fun with it. So with that being said, it's your time now. So it's your time to try. So I have two equations right there that we want to solve. So this is my equation 1 and this is my equation 2. So I want you to solve to find what my x is and what my y is. I'm gonna give you a minute and then I am gonna show you what the answer for these equations is are. So I'm gonna tell you what x and your y is gonna be equal to. So you ready? Alright. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So x is equal to 4 and y is equal to 3. So if you get these as your answer, then great job. It's always good to practice, and stay tuned because I will be uploading my second part to this video where we will be looking at the substitution method. But in the meantime, keep practicing, keep having fun with math, and this is the elimination method when finding or when solving simultaneous equation.